Independence City Council for Monday, January 10th, 2022. We have a few staff reports tonight. The first is a discussion on the management analyst position. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. This discussion was requested for tonight's study session as a result of the agenda item that was on your business session meeting last week, the roughly $2 million of federal grant monies for the 40 highway surface transportation program. We attached to your agenda item tonight the relevant sections of city code pertaining to the management analyst. Where that overlaps with this issue of the agenda item, in city code, one of the duties listed for the management analyst is to review any contract coming before the city council that is either in excess of $2 million or that's $500,000 but will be lasting more than 12 months. As the council is well aware, the city presently does not have a management analyst fulfilling that function. So I had been asked to kind of do a quick review of how this has been handled in the past when there have not been individuals in that spot, and then to make a few recommendations. So very briefly, I will let the council know that twice in the last year that we could find, in 2021, the council voted on items where the contracts were in excess of $2 million. And it contained language that said the council was waiving the procurement policy as part of that ordinance. Those agenda items were in September of 2021, a purchase order that was issued to PAR Electric for $2.2 million for the EF Phase 2 construction project for Power and Light. And then again in October of 2021, a purchase order issued to Vance Brothers for $2.5 million for the pavement maintenance roadway seals project. As I mentioned last week, there was a period of about 2 years prior to my hiring as the management analyst when the city was without somebody in that position. We went back and did some research, and we found at least one definitive example of a contract that was in excess of $2 million, which was the city's purchase and buy-in of the Dogwood power plant. At that time, the city council asked the city manager to appoint somebody as the management analyst to fulfill the contractual review obligation. So not to do performance audits or anything like that, but to fulfill the contractual review. So in October of 2011, the city council appointed then city employee Terry Hartwig as the acting management analyst. Mr. Hartwig was serving as the city's risk manager and liquor license compliance officer, so really did not have a lot of overlap with procurement at that point in his career, which appears to be the reason that he, in part, was named to that position. So, as we see it, the council does have a couple of options about how to proceed. The council could continue to do as it did in the fall of 2021 and waive the procurement policy and vote items through. The council could act as the prior council did in 2011 and appoint an existing staff member. I would recommend preferably somebody without ties to procurement, just so you have that independence. Or the council could appoint an external party to do contractual review on an as-needed, if-needed basis. I think it would be the recommendation of city staff to appoint that external party. I think having somebody to do that, to provide you that assurance, makes sense, but also to have somebody independent of the organization. I would not envision that being a firm that you were contracting with necessarily, because I don't think it's really going to be of interest or benefit to them to engage in work that's not going to be very frequent. But I think there are qualified parties out there who could provide the review for you and provide the assurance that city staff followed that bid process appropriately. So quick historical background, couple of recommendations, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Discussion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
there is a restriction. You can't have an employee who's been an employee within 5 years. And I did talk to somebody over the weekend, to be very frank, because I've been so worried about 40 Highway and the 2.3 million. I've worried about it. I was not part of the September or October waiver of the management analyst review, but I felt very strongly that if we can't just do this. I don't know if you want me to mention someone or not mention someone. He's very well equipped to do a terrific job, and I think he's doing it because he cares about independence and isn't going to charge a dime.
I would be very much in favor of, again, we've had the discussion in the past about utilizing an outside audit firm, and obviously that's not the direction the council felt it was able to go because of the requirement within the charter. But for this particular situation and on an as-needed basis, until we fill the position, which we are actively working to do, I would be in favor of pursuing something like that. I don't know, Councilmember DeLucia, if I'm too comfortable with you telling us who that might be.
And it's just this one, it's not like that person is going to
Right.
volunteer. It's this one job because it's such a valuable benefit to our town.
So it seems to me, and I'm eager to hear from, what the rest of the council has to say, but it seems to me that seems like the most viable solution from my standpoint on utilizing the same manager's spending authority. I don't think it's going to be very costly. It may not cost anything at all to have this particular contract reviewed so that we can feel that we've fulfilled our obligation to the public to have a independent evaluation and critically not lose the opportunity to
Right,
do this
right.
project.
And I would just suggest I'll give a number, a name rather, to the management analyst or manager, and if someone else does, that number can be made this week so that we can move on this. It's my hope.
Any other thoughts?
No, I agree with that. I think it's clearly the best way to go. If there's a chance we can have this person pick somebody next Monday, they'll have several weeks to do the work and give us a recommendation by the 7th or whatever that day is.
4 weeks.
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm all for it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if there's a way that we can all have some input to this, in terms of a resume or something that we can all review, well, you're gonna supply a name that he can provide to us. I think, Mr. Walker, you handled this last week. I felt like you kind of took a little bit of the brunt of not having this together. This is clearly our issue. We've got to get aggressive with providing, I didn't realize there was about five a year that we have to be prepared to look at and have the analysis that we need to make informed decisions. So I'd like to see us do we have applicants? Do we have resumes right now currently?
We do. Madam City Clerk, I believe we have a council employee advisory committee meeting scheduled
Tomorrow at 11.
tomorrow to review the applications.
Do we know what the number is right now?
There's 4 or 5? 4, something like that?
Okay.
4 or 5?
So we have a good number here. Do we have, Madam City Clerk, do we have a time frame of when we'll be getting those from that review process to us so that we can begin to be aggressive towards that?
The past process that we used was the Employee Advisory Committee made their recommendations. As soon as they make those recommendations tomorrow, then we can start setting up interviews for the full council.
Okay, so we should have something by week's end, maybe?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, all right. So I think if we are agreed that we need to be aggressive towards this, and then in the meantime, as a stopgap to look at that, I think that would be good if we can all get that information. But I'd like for that pressure to be put on us and not the city manager, because it's our responsibility. And if we've been laxed in that, we've got to step it up a little bit to get that done.
Okay, any other comments on this topic? Great. Next item is presentation of city spending authority. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, I'm going to ask the Director of Finance Administration, Brian Kidney, to come forward. Occasionally, we think it's best practice to review where we're at with our city manager spending authority, just to give an update on that and make sure that the council remains comfortable with that. So Mr. Kidney is just going to give a quick review of where we're at, where we've been, and see if we need any additional feedback this evening.
In the agenda packet, I just simply gone through the last couple of years what the updates have been to procurement policy. I thought I turned it on. Thank you. So the latest action was this past April of 2021, where an ordinance was approved to change the procurement level for the city manager from $100,000 to $50,000. It's really all I have to offer. That was changed from originally May of 2019, where it had been $50,000 and it had been increased to $100,000. And so the action this last April moved it back down to $50,000.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from the council?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I really look at the money, and when we were first in here, we moved that number from 25,000 up to 50,000, and then it went to 100,000. And the money allows us now to be part of that money being spent. And I'm concerned that even 50,000 is too high, and maybe it should go back to 25. That's where I'm at.
Are there any other comments from the council? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kidney. Mr. City Manager?
Telling him to stay because he's got
Oh.
the last item.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I didn't pick up the signals. Okay. The final item is that staff is seeking guidance on placing a resolution before the council to determine if increase in fire sales tax will be captured by the tax increment finance districts within the city. So, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you for reading that, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
The council will recall that the voters approved an increase in the fire sales tax last November. That's increased that amount by an additional 3/8 of a cent. We started a discussion a while back ago about the application of that in the TIF districts. I've asked Mr. Kidney tonight to clean that conversation up just a little bit for more clarity so that we can get specified direction from the council about that application. So I'll let Mr. Kidney give you a review of the decision that staff is seeking guidance on.
Okay.
Thank you. This is in regards to only the tax increment financing districts. If you recall, a tax increment financing district does not have its own sales tax as opposed to like a CID or a TDD. It just simply captures the increment from when the base was to what then comes in during that period. None of the TIFs that we have in place contemplated an increase in the fire sales tax, so there's no reason then to capture that increase in sales tax. There's no legal reason to. There's no legal obligation that you would have with the developer. The development agreements that you have do not say, oh, any increase in the sales tax rate would need to be captured. However, there is a provision, if the council so wished, by ordinance, they'd be able to apply that increase of fire sales tax to be captured by the TIF districts. Staff is not recommending that, but we just simply wanted to make sure that there's clarification, because that question gets asked sometimes about, well, wait a minute, in a TIF district, what happens to this increase in sales tax? If the council were not did not do an ordinance. Basically, that additional 3/8 cents sales tax on the fire would simply go to the special fire sales tax, just like was mentioned or requested in the ordinance that established that increase. So all this tonight was just clarification that if the council would like to put a resolution down that says we do not want the sales tax increase to be captured in the TIF. That was kind of the reasoning behind that. And the reason staff had suggested that is down the road, we get a lot of questions like, wait a minute, what did the council decide? What did that election decide to do on that? And there's sometimes not good records of, well, this was the specific intent of this obscure part of the TIF. So we thought, well, if we put in a resolution that established, no, we do not want that to go, then there'd be a record and we would just point to people. But I want to be clear, if the council did not take any action, either by ordinance or by resolution, nothing would happen. The sales tax would go on to the fire sales tax as the voters asked for. The item here was, hey, legal counsel mentioned, you could capture that if you wanted. We're like, well, let's make sure we get this in front of council and see what their decision would be. I think staff has a really clear indication of what that would be, but just wanted that to be an item if you wanted to discuss it.
Yes,
Madam
go
Mayor.
ahead.
Mr. Kidney, so the thing is, as it sits, if we do nothing, the fire keeps the money.
Yeah, if the city would not,
If we do nothing,
you do nothing,
fire gets the money.
right. If you pass a resolution that says we want the fire to get the money, the fire will get the money. The only way that would be captured is if you considered an
Specifically
ordinance.
said, we're taking a
Yeah.
chunk of that to put into the
Yes.
TIF. So,
Correct.
I would imagine, well, everybody can speak for themselves. I would, you said it would be helpful down the road if we pass something that says our intent, in case somebody in 20 years looks at it, that it might be nice to have the intent of the council there that no, the money will not be captured, it will go to fire. Is that right?
Correct. The idea was, well, did anyone ever ask the council? And you couldn't find a record that it was even brought to council. So that's why we thought we'd put a negative assurance in there.
I got
With
you.
a
Well, I'd be up for that, so I don't know how Brad Bells feels, but we might just have you put it on as a finance thing or city thing or whatever you guys think.
Can I please speak?
Yes,
Thank you so much. The ballot doesn't put it to TIF. I would encourage the ballot's plain language be followed. We do not need a resolution telling us to ignore our citizens. We don't ignore our citizens. So I don't think we need anything. When I voted yes for these people, I didn't think, oh, yes, I'm going to give some to help TIF. No. They asked for the money for a specific reason, and that's what I'm suggesting.
so this is very interesting, because when this came up, I'm like, I don't remember ever hearing this discussion prior. We've run a lot of ballot initiatives, even in the last 10 years. But I guess it occurred to me that this is the only increase that we've done. Streets, or these TIF districts the last tax increase we had was the police and fire tax in 2004. Because the streets was already in place, parks was already in place, stormwater was already in place, and the votes of the people just made those perpetual. But there was no tax increase with any of those. So this is interesting, the very first tax increase that we've had since these TIF districts were established. I know they were all done at different times, but I asked the city manager, I'm like, why are we even talking about this? We've never talked about this before when the voters have passed taxes, but I guess it's because they were just continuations and extensions and there aren't any increases. So that's just kind of very interesting information. I mean, I absolutely think that, I mean, there's no question that the money should go to fire when these TIF districts, these TIF developments, or any development was happening. I don't think that we really, as a community, adequately provided for the increased demands that would be placed on police and fire with this new development, which we're seeing now. Now we need a fire station out east. I mean, so it just totally makes sense. And I agree with Councilmember DeLucci that that's what the ballot language says. There's no option. It doesn't seem that the council could ever take that money and use it for anything but fire. So I'm not sure, again, that we need a resolution. I think just by virtue of having this open meeting and having a record that we said it should probably be sufficient. But it does point out a very interesting kind of historical note that although we've passed a lot of taxes, none of them have been increases.
Madam Mayor? So, I'm just curious, have we had situations where we have not taken the money, or we've taken ballot initiatives, we've taken that money and applied it towards TIFs unbeknownst to the council?
Oh, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, it raises the question of concern, if this is something that's being brought to us, has it been something that's happened in the past that we need to
No, this
correct?
is just an abundance of accounting nerdness.
No, and
is
I'm
what
all
this
for
is.
that, but,
Yeah.
I mean, we have to ask, that way it goes on record that, no, this has not been an issue in the past, and that way we know that the motivation is clear, it's pure, and we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. I'm all for it. But we have to ask.
So, Mr. Kenny, I mean, do you feel it's sufficient in the public record if we ensure that this is included in the minutes from the meeting, that that will suffice?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's no, yeah, this was just,
It seems
actually
like a
started
little
as a,
bit
hey,
of
people ask me this question, and it
Yeah.
is like one of those
Well,
legal
now
things.
you know.
Now I know. Yeah.
Unless there's any other comments or question. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other discussion topics the council wishes to bring forward this evening? Okay. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Nothing else tonight. Thank you.
We are adjourned.